Welcome to Origin of Solutions, the ESCAP podcast, where we explore how innovation and cooperation are shaping a more sustainable and inclusive Asia and the Pacific. I'm Sompot Supputhamongkhon. Women's health remains one of the most underserved areas in our region, with far-reaching social and economic costs. But a new wave of innovation, Femtech, or women's health technology, is creating opportunities to make care more accessible, affordable, and tailored to women's needs. In today's episode, we will explore why women's health innovation matters and the steps needed to support startup and scale solutions. Joining us today are Lindsay, founder of Femtech Association Asia, Sastya Wardani, co-founder of OV Health, and Elena, investing from ESCAP's Trade, Investment and Innovation. Welcome to our episode. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What first inspired you to work in this area?
First of all, thank you so much for having us. This is a really exciting podcast, and I love seeing women's health and femtech front and center as far as when we talk about solutions in Asia, and even more specifically in Southeast Asia, because there is so much momentum and movement. My name is Lindsay Davis. I'm the founder of Femtech Association Asia. We are the region's first and largest specialist advisory and industry network for those who are passionate, interested, working in, those with a core focus on improving women's health through technology solutions.
Hi, everyone. So lovely to be here. So I started working for the UN about 10 years ago now. And for me, it's always been driven by my interest and my passion for gender equality and more just and equitable society. But also, I believe that the private sector is a core part to how our societies work and how we can drive solutions.
My name is Sastya. I'm the founder of OV Health, a women's health platform that focuses on helping women understand their fertility, hormones, and overall reproductive wellness. My background is actually not in health. I started in finance. It was an intersection between data and human behavior that was my expertise throughout my finance journey. With that project, I realized very early on that when it comes to women and women's life, health is very important, but then at the same time, it's the most complicated ones. And so women health, within that, there's so much data, but so little understanding.
One of the common questions we ask on every episode is, what solutions are you working on for the region?
My work focuses on creating enabling conditions for startups and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises in the region. I'm really interested particularly in sectors that make our societies better and that contribute to the SDGs, whether that is climate tech, whether that is femtech or the likes, but really areas that have disproportionate opportunities right now, especially technology, and that directly contributes to better societies and economies for the region.
So Femtech Association Asia, we are looking at building the ecosystem that is supporting the industry. So that includes founders, investors, media partners, corporate partners, ecosystem builders, clinicians, key opinion leaders. So all of these different individuals who are looking to contribute to the advancement of women's health through technology solutions. We do this in four main ways: through thought leadership and research, through programming and events, through amplification and really amplifying with the media, the industry, the startups, and the founder stories to kind of build the narrative around the potential of this industry. And then finally, through community building.
For us at OV Health, we're building what we call a personal health assistant for women. We start from period and fertility insight and then expanding into holistic well-being, including longevity. So we work closely with partners such as clinics. And right now we work with more than 150 clinics in 5 countries in Asia, and we want to make women's health more accessible and actionable. So our platform combines cycle tracking data with lifestyle, sleep, even emotional indicators to create this personal insight, not just about fertility, but about women's hormone can actually impact daily life. And we're also piloting programs that connects this data with early screenings as well as workplace health initiatives, including other initiatives that can help to open up this access to women's health in general. And so women can move from reactive care to proactive wellness.
Why do you think women's health has been underserved for so long, and what makes Femtech such a game changer for the region?
In my view, it's pretty simple. We live in a world that's been biased for so long, and the people that have made the decisions in medical research, in what gets funded, and in policy just didn't prioritize women's health for far too long. What that means is that we have a massive gap in research and innovation around women's health in particular, and that's related to any kind of health issues that disproportionately affect women, whether that's pregnancy or menopause or autoimmune diseases. That's for me where Femtech comes in as a game changer. It's really about reimagining what could healthcare look like, what could technology look like to fix this issue. And what I also love about Femtech is that it's very obvious how it's great for women. It's very obvious how it would improve health outcomes, but it's also great for the economy. It's also great for our societies. Improving women's health outcomes and leveraging technology for it is so obviously good for us and all of us. For example, the World Economic Forum and McKinsey have estimated that closing the gender health gap would add over $1 trillion to the global economy every year by 2040. So it's great for women if the health improves, but it's really amazing for everyone.
So we even look at the term Femtech, and we know that only 1 in 4 women in Southeast Asia are familiar with the term. So part of it is even just building our education. And again, that's where Femtech is a game changer, in that a lot of our startups have this really safe space, this really trusted and vetted resource to go where we can actually talk about women's health in a comfortable space. And I give the example of a piece of research that Femtech Association Asia did in partnership with Milu Insight. In June of 2024, we released the information that 52% of women don't feel comfortable openly speaking about their health due to fear of judgment or shame. Now, if we talked about this more openly, normalized the conversation around women's health, and also looked at our education, our programs, and the awareness, that really is the game changer. And I do think that's where Femtech comes in. 1, in serving the market and addressing these gaps that Elena talks about, but 2, actually looking at the money. So market and money. So actually looking at how there is an untapped market for those who are investors and looking to explore an untapped commercial opportunity and looking at the transfer of wealth to women over the next 25 years. I think there's a pretty outstanding argument to say Femtech is going to be a game changer.
I think through the business perspective, Femtech is game changing because women's health itself is something that is very personal. When we talk about health in general, only in the past decades that we can finally say that men and women are different when it comes to health. And then when it comes to women's health, just in general, it's also very different stage by stage. And when we talk about like women's health, for a longest time, it has always been used to just pregnancy. Only when we're talking about Femtech, we realize that women's health actually very broad. Pregnancy is just a very small fraction of the whole woman's health. We also realize that women's health itself is very much closely related to culture, to like family, to other issues. And all this while we have not been talking about it because we didn't know. And then the moment we started talking about it, we realized there's so many things that we didn't know. And because of Femtech itself, for the first time, women can finally track, we can understand, at the same time so we can advocate for our own health in a way that wasn't possible before because now we know better. So in Southeast Asia alone, this is especially powerful because now we get to combine technology with the information of this like data, combine it also with cultural change. It's totally different among each and every country.
From the founder's perspective, what was the inspiration behind starting a Femtech company? What challenges did you encounter early on?
It started with my own frustration that I experienced when I was in my early 20s. I feel like personally, my life has been reduced to only a specific stages of life to kind of prove myself as a woman. Even as an educated woman, I don't know anything. And because I don't know anything, I feel like I don't have any option. So I started looking into the whole woman sector for the past 6 years. Then along the way, I realized that it's not only about pregnancy, and even before after pregnancy is very important in women's life. So that's where I personally and as a business, we are growing, expanding into a complete woman's health and longevity.
From another founder perspective, and obviously of a community, an industry network, and an advisory in the Femtech space, I launched it because I saw a gap in the market. There was no one else really kind of leading this industry in Asia, and even more specifically in Southeast Asia at the time. The second part was a commercial opportunity. So that links directly to the biggest challenge we've had, which is how to move the perception in the ecosystem and the market from charitable giving, from impact, from nonprofit to this is an actual commercial opportunity. Health tech, digital health, healthcare, these are all very lucrative fields. So my whole goal is a B2B focus on how we actually build an industry. So part of that is the narrative and obviously overcoming that challenge of getting people to really understand and helping people understand and educating the professional community on the opportunities and this untapped market, really the white space that we have for entrepreneurs as well to enter the field.
We know awareness and stigma around women's health remain real barriers. How can communities and innovators help shift mindsets and normalize these conversations?
You're absolutely right. Awareness and stigma are definitely major issues still for this sector. over half of all women in Southeast Asia feel that it's culturally unacceptable to talk about women's health topics due to societal taboos. And then there's also a question of awareness. So around 43% of women who aren't using Femtech products say it's because they just don't know about the solution. So how I see it is that this sector, it's not just fighting stigma, but it's also fighting invisibility. And what makes me really upset about this is that, for example, social media is so important for raising awareness, for reaching new customers, for every sector today. And social media platforms have a really clear history of not making this possible at all. So we have quite a few founders that I've spoken with that have had their posts flagged as offensive, have had ads rejected, have accounts suspended, have even been banned from key social media platforms. They've had to go around this by not really advertising their products, but going more abstract, or by replacing images of, bodies with fruit or the likes. And I'm really not talking about controversial topics. I'm talking about things like breast cancer awareness. How can you ban breast cancer awareness? Because it's too controversial or offensive. But this is clearly happening. The main platforms that are supposed to enable this are really blocking it today.
At the end of the day, women's health and the stigma around it also shapes how government creates law within each and every country. We see now a lot of policies when it comes to family planning or even fertility are more related into the family values and other values. I also see the fastest way to break stigma is also to start the conversations where women already are, then at the same time, increasing the conversations that we have not only among the women, but also the policymakers, government, people who are actually able to make law and decision. When we talk with the policymaker, we could be relating a woman's health to something else like economy, productivity, and stuff like that.
If we want to make the change around awareness and stigma, it's going to be education to generate consumer demand. What happens with consumer demand? New businesses launch, new startups are created to answer the call of those consumers. What breaks stigma faster than anything? Return on investment for investors, for VCs, for angel investors.
So, access to funding is often cited as a hurdle. What needs to change in the investment and policy landscape to create a stronger ecosystem for Femtech in Southeast Asia?
Now, this is one of my favorite topics. I've done quite a bit of research around the gender finance gap and making access to investment more equitable for startups in the region. It's clear that access to finance is an issue for startups generally. But in the Femtech, it's so much worse because a lot of the founders are women. And we know that women globally secure only about 2% of venture capital funding. And we know that this is not because women just aren't good at pitching. We know that the problem is that the system is really, really biased. And this starts with things like women being asked different questions in funding negotiation, women having normally fewer investors among their networks, and with women being underrepresented among investors themselves. And sometimes, this bias, it's really subtle and you barely know it's there. And sometimes it's shockingly obvious. So for example, one founder told us that she was literally told by an investor, "We love your company. We love your profile in general. We want to invest. But do you know a man who's like you, but who could run the company instead of you?" I was still really angry about this, talking about periods in a pitch. It's maybe not so uncomfortable for the founder doing it because they know it's important, but it's often quite uncomfortable for the investors. The founder told me that she was told her business was not of interest because the investor just didn't want to talk about period blood in his Monday morning meetings. With this kind of double challenge of having a lot of female founders, which again, I really think is a good thing if you're talking about women's health, having at least one founder on the team who has personal experience with it should be a positive thing. But then you combine it with also this discomfort around women's health issues among investors, just makes it double difficult for Femtech founders. In my view, to fix this, what we need is a mix of more diverse investment teams. So we really need more women investors. We also need better investment criteria and processes to have less bias. And then we also need better policies and public support for early stage innovation led by women focused on women's health outcomes. We've put together a really practical guide for investors and for founders on how to overcome the biases that are currently present, the Equity Lens Toolkit and the Equity Lens Founders Guide. I would encourage any investors or founders listening to this to take a look.
I just wanted to follow up and give some statistics to really drive the point home around representation in the room, the decision makers, the founders, the investors. Deal Street Asia in September of 2024 said that women make up just 18% of investment decision makers at Southeast Asia headquartered venture investment firms. So already we see there's a smaller amount of women involved in the space. So there is a call for diversity in our decision making. The second thing I want to call out on founders and bias in the actual pitch process. In Femtech Association Asia, we're over 84% female founders. But so far what we've seen is a great portion of the actual dollar amounts allocated have been to male-founded companies in the femtech space. Now, we are grateful that there's funding in the space at all, of course, but we'd love to really just see how can we overcome that bias even in an industry that's for women and those with women's healthcare needs by women entrepreneurs. So we want to make sure that we continue raising the profiles. And again, amplification being a key pillar of ours to really support the startups and founders. Also, on a broader scope, just wanted to share a little bit about investment in femtech in Southeast Asia. We've done our research this year, and in April of 2025, we found that 64% of femtech funding for Southeast Asia comes from Southeast Asia. So within the region, of that, 44% comes from Singapore headquarters investors. So I think it's just interesting to hear about where the investment, the dollars are coming from, noting that we also see the largest number of femtech startups in Singapore. So there's definitely correlation between volume of startups and investment dollars.
I think there's still something that's going to be changing in the next few years. I do see it becoming so much better in the past 2 years alone, but I think it will still take another 2 to 3 years for it to actually able to show a lot more traction when it comes to investment in women health sector. We also need all of these investors to understand women health is just like any other health industry where the impact can be a little bit long term. So it doesn't scale like every other industry, but it's also scaled through time. And so all the policies that supporting this investment decision should also change.
So, looking ahead, what gives you the most optimism about the future of women's health technology, and what impact do you hope to see in the coming years?
For me, I'm most optimistic about in a very engaged ecosystem, a very engaged community. We see more and more startups being launched, 77% in the past 6 years of femtech startups in Southeast Asia. We see more and more policy change supporting women. We see community engagement like UN ESCAP Feminist Finance Forum. And finally, when we look at the consumer, I mean, talk about engagement. We have a consumer base that users right now, we estimate, are going to be increasing their spend by 5%. We have non-users, of which 54% say they have intent or consideration to start using femtech. And I think that enthusiasm is really going to drive the industry forward.
What excites me the most is the shift from tracking, education, action. For years, we've grown with Women Health app in the technology part. They're collecting data but don't really give an insight. So nothing is actionable for women. But now with the understanding of personalization combined with the growing AI and better medical collaboration, we can turn those in data and information into something that is actually life-changing, such as now we see a lot more early diagnosis, even normal problems like PCOS or endometriosis, to optimizing fertility windows naturally. And I'm also hopeful about how other stakeholders becoming more active when it comes to supporting women's health, such as employers or even insurers.
What gives me most optimism are the people that are persevering in really challenging environments as well, and then making this happen. So I'm thinking of, people like Sastya and Lindsay that have been driving women's health innovation from even years ago when the environment was still much harder and we haven't seen so much uptake. Then also the positive trends that we've been seeing in the last few years, both in this region, but also globally, that women's health is moving in people's minds from the niche that people put it in to where it belongs, into the mainstream, into a major global priority. And I hope that we'll see shifts that go alongside that, especially in policy and in funding, to recognize women's health as the key issue for all of our societies that it is, then we'll all get to benefit. Women will get to benefit from better health outcomes, but also our economies will benefit. The investors will benefit from the great returns that they'll get, and we'll all have just stronger, healthier, more equitable societies.
It's been insightful to hear from your perspective and expertise. Before we wrap up, what would you like our listener to take away from today's conversation?
Women's health is not a niche. On the contrary, it's a mainstream because it is exactly half of the population. The more we talk, the more we'll realize that there's a lot of gap that we need to fill, and that should increase our understanding on how big the market is.
When I think about anyone who is starting to explore Femtech and the industry, or maybe even further along, the first thing I'd say is get connected with the industry. And that could even start with visiting the Femtech Association Asia LinkedIn page or our website or reading our blog. The biggest thing is that Asia's next wave of innovation will come from women. It's going to come from women entrepreneurs. It's going to come from women consumers. And ultimately, the more we see women with better health, women with more wealth, I think that's really going to change the whole landscape.
To explore this topic further, check out our report, Femtech in Southeast Asia, Unlocking Innovation for Women's Health, which was written by Lindsay and myself, and also features Sastya and her business. It dives further into data, stories, and the opportunities that we've mentioned today.
That's all for today's episode of A Region of Solutions. A heartfelt thanks to our guests for sharing how innovation in this space is not only about technology, but also about empowering women, reshaping conversations, and unlocking opportunities for healthier and more inclusive societies. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and be part of the solution for our region.